Tea-Biz Podcast delivers tea news that you need to know. A recap of the week's major headlines with commentary and cultural trends hosted by Dan Bolton. It is the voice of origin for tea professionals and enthusiasts worldwide.
Think of us as a digital caravan of storytellers, bringing authentic, authoritative, and exclusive stories to you weekly from the tea lands. Hello, everyone. Here are this week's headlines. Intestinal bacteria is tied to low COVID deaths. Tea trade and tariffs boost globalization, a TN22 forecast, and food inflation eases. More in a minute, but first, this important message.
What makes a perfect cup of Ceylon tea? The perfect cup is from the tea businesses that ensure the protection of all the children living within their tea estates. We salute Kailani Valley, Talawakili, Bogawanthalawa, Harana, and Elliptia tea estates. Support Save the Children, Sri Lanka.
Japanese researchers speculate that an abundance of intestinal bacteria known to suppress the binding of coronavirus to human cell receptors likely plays a role in the low COVID-19 mortality rates seen in Asia and Northern Europe. The study by researchers at Nagoya University analyzed 30 gut microorganisms in 953 healthy subjects in 10 countries. Where COVID-19 mortality rates are low, such as South Korea, Japan, and Finland, high concentrations of Collencella bacteria were found. In Belgium, Britain, Italy, and the United States, where mortality rates are high, subjects had the lowest levels of Collencella. In a report in the Japan Times, the study's lead researcher, Masaki Hiroyama, an associate professor at the university's Graduate School of Medicine, said, quote, "I'm not saying that intestinal bacteria alone can cure COVID-19. The purpose of this study was to see if we could make a breakthrough in treatment if we could find at least one thing related to factor X, an unknown genetic trait that scientists speculate accounts for low infection and death rates in some populations." In a related development, peer-reviewed research involving Japanese healthcare workers revealed an association between the consumption of green tea and resistance to viral infection. Individuals who consumed more than 4 cups of tea a day had lower odds of SARS-CoV infection, as reported in Medical Life Sciences News. The findings are in line with previous data from Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine, showing that epigallocalatin gallate, EGCG, significantly reduced the infectiousness of the coronavirus. The study, published in the journal Clinical Nutrition Open Science, investigated blood from 2,640 participants at a Tokyo-based referral hospital. 3% of participants tested positive for COVID during the study period. Researchers used multiple logistic regression to estimate the odds ratio of SARS infection based on consumption of green tea. The study concludes, quote, "Since lower odds of infection in people with high green tea consumption was observed across many different outcomes and timings, this suggests that green tea consumption could prevent both symptomatic or asymptomatic infection, regardless of vaccination status," end quote. Nearly 40% of those studied drink green tea daily. Tea trade and tariffs boost globalization. This is the 7th of 12 TN22 forecasts for the new year. In trade and logistics, the pandemic proved the proverb, where there's a will, there's a way. Travel restrictions throttled direct trade negotiations on site, but increased virtual face-to-face conversations and sales. At one point, the cost of transporting a container was higher than the value of the tea within, leading suppliers to double their efforts to sell high-value exports to thirsty domestic markets eager to upgrade their experience. As oil prices spiked and fertilizer costs doubled, farms began using biochar to reduce runoff and switched to mixing locally grown ground cover for compost with synthetics. Tea makers invested in solar and hydropower, as tea sellers like Bigelow Tea invested in electric vehicles. The pandemic demonstrated the vulnerability of just-in-time logistics, which generally limits the number of tea suppliers. Nowadays, wholesale and retail buyers, anticipating long lead times before delivery, order larger quantities from geographically and politically diverse sources. Tariffs and the trade war between the U.S. and China and the U.S. and Europe actually increased by 3% global trade in products not targeted by tariffs. Quote, that means the trade war did not just lead to reallocation of third country exports to the U.S. or China, it also resulted in net trade creation, end quote, writes one of the authors of a paper analyzing trade published in American Economic Review. Quote, while the net effect of the trade war on the world economy was an increase in trade, there was enormous variation across countries, end quote, according to the study. Quote, the big winner of the trade war seems to be bystander countries with deep international ties, end quote. Subject to onerous tariffs on tea, China simply expanded its reach, increasing total exports to more than $2 billion in 2021. The above suggests fears that the pandemic would lead to deglobalization are unfounded. Learn more by visiting the Tea-Biz blog. Food inflation is noticeable everywhere you look. Tea prices are on the rise as unit volumes fall. In the U.S. and Canada, consumers are switching to private label brands after a year in which inflation rose 7% in December, a 4-decade high. Total sales of packaged tea will continue to rise in 2022, but as in 2021, growth will be largely driven by price increases. Chicago-based market research firm IRI recorded a 7.8% decline last year in unit sales of tea bags and loose tea at U.S. mass market, convenience, grocery, and drug stores in the 52 weeks ending December 26th. Prices per unit were up an average of 7 cents to $3.53 per SKU. Unit sales of canned and bottled tea also declined by 2.8% as unit prices increased by an average of 15 cents per SKU. As consumer behaviors shift towards pre-pandemic normalcy, the combination of rising raw goods expenses, aluminum for cans is up 60%, the price of fertilizer has doubled, spiking supply chain costs and increased labor expenses mean higher prices are here to stay. Quote, while the worst of tea inflation seems to be behind us, we're now seeing inflationary trends in packaging and freight costs, says Sunil D'Souza, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Tata Consumer Products. IRA's Krishna Kumar Devi writes that, quote, with the Omicron variant still a wild card, supply chain issues still a challenge, and inflation potentially peaking by mid-year, we remain in an unpredictable CPG environment, end quote. Consumer packaged goods manufacturers are rolling out big price increases for essentials. In food service, Market researcher Data Central reports that 87% of consumers see signs of rising prices, with 83% saying they are concerned about inflation. Their concern is broad, with 80% of those surveyed saying that inflation will get worse. 34% of respondents expect the inflationary period will last through 2023 or longer. How do consumers respond to inflation expectations? Data Central CEO Jack Lee notes that as inflation worsens, 42% of consumers say they will cut back on restaurant meals, far more than live entertainment at 36%, and clothing purchases, also 36%, or those for going travel, 33%. Quote, inflation and supply chain disruptions will remain a problem in 2022, writes RBC Capital Markets. While some inputs are already coming off their peaks, more meaningful relief will take course over the next couple of years. Biz Insight. Grocery consultant Phil Lempert predicts a new normal. He told Food Processing Magazine, quote, we already have the cheapest food in the world, and we've been so focused on having a cheap food supply that we've ignored certain other things, like the human factor and social distancing in factories, and stuff like that. In the future, we won't have a choice, he said. Certainly the retailer and the CPG company can't absorb all those costs, and some of them will have to be put on the consumer, end quote. Aravinda Anantharaman in Bengaluru reports on this week's tea auction prices.
India Tea Price Report for the week ending January 22nd, 2022. The Indian tea industry has responded to the announcement of the new tea bill. The Tea Board had sought comments on the amendment from stakeholders within a stipulated time of 11 days in January 2022. In Assam, various trade unions have written to the government demanding more time to go over the bill. They state that this rush to source responses defeats the democratic process by which stakeholder opinions are sought and heard. How the bill will address the real concerns of the tea industry stakeholders remains to be seen. In auctions, Sale 3 saw good demand for teas across all the auction centers in North India. Middle East was active for orthodox tea, while Darjeeling, leaf and dust tea grades saw more internal players. Tata Consumer lent good support to CTC, while Hindustan Unilever was active for dust. In Guwahati, Hindustan Unilever was active for both leaf and dust teas. In the south, Coonoor saw an improvement in demand for CTC leaf. Major blenders were selective, picking up about 33% of the total CTC leaf on offer. Cochin saw good demand for both leaf and dust. In prices, North India saw marginal decrease in prices, also marginal decrease in the quantity of tea sold. In South India, the prices were nearly the same as Sale 2, with 10% increase in sold quantity.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Q-Trade understands that a successful tea blend goes beyond the creative fusion of appearance, aroma, and flavor. Our multi-award-winning product development team is passionate about converting natural ingredients into sensory experiences that customers crave. Every recipe is formulated with a commercial backbone of dependable quality sourcing with a pricing structure that supports a safe, regulated, profitable, and scalable blend. Q-Trade meets every brand's retail, food service, and e-commerce need. For more information, visit our website, qtradeteas.com.
This week, T-Biz travels to Zurich, Switzerland, where Brew co-founder Bogdan Krinitchko describes the Consumer Electronics Show debut of his award-winning specialty tea brewer. And then to Tucson, Arizona, where the International Specialty Tea Association announced it has developed evaluation protocols and assembled a panel of tasters who share a common lexicon and have calibrated their sensory expertise to consistently judge tea quality based on the skill of its makers. In November 2019, Kickstarter donors pledged 500,000 Swiss francs to finance a startup specialty tea brewer designed by Swiss engineer Bogdan Krinitchko. Bogdan partnered with Philippe Carlsberg to create BrewMaker One, an Internet of Things device powered by smartphones that memorize settings for brew time, temperature, and water quality. The single-cup brewer uses whole leaf tea, not capsules, with push-button convenience. 3 years later, after receiving 10,000 orders and a U.S. patent, the machine is a reality. Unveiled at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January, Brew won several awards for innovation and will begin shipping this spring. It's such a pleasure, Bogdan, to have you on our podcast today.
First of all, thanks, Dan, for having me here.
You recently returned to Switzerland after presenting brew to the 40,000 techies who attended the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Will you tell us about that experience?
As a small Swiss startup, it was a great experience. We were super thankful that we got supported by the Swiss Techs, which is the Technology Innovation Council of Switzerland. So we were basically, I think, around 14 startups. We were one of the, I think, 2 that had physical hardware product. And overall, it was just a great experience. Also a little bit of media attention. It was also great timing to be there for us.
This is the first time that the public has been able to taste tea brewed on the BrewMaker One. How was the new brewer received at CES?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting feedback because in the beginning, people who never heard about us came to our booth and asked, is this a coffee machine? And I said, no, this is a tea machine. It makes it a perfect cup at the push of a button without any capsules or pods. Yeah, when I showed how the machine actually works, how it operates, how easy it is to use, I think everybody likes it. We got featured in CBS. USA Today gave us an award, and we won the award for the top 50 products at the CES. Another award that we won from Avensis Partners. It's called the NICE Award. BBC Click mentioned us as well. Also great PR attention in the UK.
I know that the more than 4,200 tea lovers who backed your Kickstarter project are looking forward to tasting their first brew cup. Will you update listeners on the final stages of manufacturing and when the brewers will begin to ship?
We actually met a few backers at the CES. And we will post our monthly update with an overview of the machine, like how it looks and so on, because right now those are still pre-production samples. So that's why it was also great timing with the CES, because a few months earlier, and we could not bring that machine. Right after the Chinese New Year's, we will continue with the certification. Certification takes a couple of weeks because we want the product is safe and durable. What we communicate is to be ready to ship in around Q2, beginning of Q2. But we are really careful by promising anything since we have almost 10,000 people who are waiting for our product. What we can say is the product is real. You can touch it. It's not just as an idea anymore. The injection molds, everything is done. Right now we are working on the whole fulfillment side. As you know, this is for us actually a real big handicap, because when we did the calculations back in 2019, we had estimated a shipping price per machine of around $2 to $3. Right now, we are facing $10 to $12 to $15. Also, the machine got improved. We added some features and functions. So, those are currently the challenges that we are solving. But we are confident that every backer will get the machine and will be happy.
The International Specialty Tea Association, working closely with Tucson-based ProSense Consumer Research, has completed a 14-month pilot to train and calibrate a panel of tea tasters with new protocols to evaluate the quality of a wide variety of specialty teas. The first full panel descriptive analysis they undertake will be black tea due to its commercial importance and high variability. The association writes that, quote, producers of black tea, new and old, are seeking a sustainable market for high-value, high-skill specialty products, and they need a system that recognizes and rewards tea makers for that effort, end quote. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us on the Tea Biz podcast today. Will you tell our listeners a little about the organization?
So ISTA is an organization that was founded as an education and research organization, a nonprofit. And over the last few years, our main project has been to develop evaluation standards, a framework for evaluation of specialty tea, to give some shape to the premiumized tea products that producers are making, increasingly consumers are buying. Internationally, there aren't a lot of standards that govern quality. Unlike other beverages, coffee namely, where there's a specific threshold for what you could call a specialty coffee, there isn't really a threshold or a uniform way of defining a specialty tea. There's also lots of different systems of evaluating teas of different origins, different qualities, but there isn't really a lot of unification and agreement on how to evaluate your tea and what aspects you should be looking for. So with ISTA, our project is trying to develop a system that you can do just that.
The first challenge, then, was for ISTA to determine the common characteristics of well-made tea. To do so, you enlisted Dr. Rena Schifrin, an academic with 30 years of experience in sensory evaluation, and the owner of ProSense Consumer Research Center.
Over the past 14 months, Dr. Rena Schifrin and her panel of tasters with ISTA have trained, calibrated, and experimented. So the goal of this descriptive analysis panel was to pilot a system for evaluating tea based on the skill of its tea makers. That included vetting our evaluation protocol, developing a shared lexicon that's anchored in aroma and flavor references, and piloting a style guide. Of course, a challenging feat to pull off, something that can recognize quality or the commonalities of quality across a broad range of styles and preferences and regions that make up the tea industry globally. So over the past 14 months, what we've done for this project is train a panel to identify the sensory attributes of tea. Specifically, what we've focused on is identifying what are the commonalities of well-made tea. The goal here is to look at the skill of the tea maker. We want to find how is that reflected universally, different teas.
Soon after the panel began its work, COVID infections reached new highs.
Because of the pandemic and because of participants being from really all over the country, all over the globe, is totally been conducted remotely, which has been quite a challenge. We've had some fits and starts getting things in place, but it's also been a really important proving ground. Really, the goal of this system is to have calibration in remote settings. So tea that's evaluated for certain qualities in origin can be evaluated in the same way in its destination and even by its end user. And if we've created a system that can serve all these different points in the supply chain, then we're doing something right.
Assessing tea quality using protocols universally accepted by buyers and sellers will make it much easier to value transactions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, is that producers will get a better price for their tea, and that risk of trying to premiumize your line and change quality, experiment, is going to be rewarded. And so you're going to be recognized. That's the hope. We're doing our best to stand on the shoulders of giants. We're paying attention to existing systems of quality evaluation that are present at origin. We're not trying to redefine how people are judging the quality of their tea as the tea producer. We're not trying to prescribe what tea is. Really, we're trying to take what's already there on a very sophisticated and well understood level and just bring that to the surface, bring it into common language to where it's understood across the supply chain. Once that happens, you solve that issue of asymmetry in information between the buyer and seller, or origin and destination. And with that, you can get better quality tea and a better price for producers. That's our goal.
Intrigued by what you heard in today's podcast? Would you like to learn more from our global network of Tea-Biz journalists and tea experts? Remember to visit the Tea-Biz website for more comprehensive coverage. That's www.t-biz.com. Thanks for listening. Farewell till next week.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.